All right, we are live. What's up, everybody? It is Mr. Drew, here to welcome you to another episode of the Andrew Glowczewski Experience. It's going to be episode 340. What the hell? Oh, yeah. Something in my sink is sliding. That can't be good. Um, um, anyways, welcome to episode 340. We're going to continue the Bayonetta study, going through the character concept art of Bayonetta, the original Bayonetta 1, and going through all this beautiful concept art that created the character one by one and breaking down each design. It's gotten to the point where I'm kind of dedicating a page to a design just because there's like, I could kind of draw the original, but then there's some things I kind of want to highlight or kind of put the outfit into action and see what that would look like, to see if it's even feasible to have clothing like that in an action sort of game. Anyways, this is, are we focused? This is the art book, and we're working on this design here. On the last stream, I colored in all of this design, and yeah, we're just gonna pick up with this one. I'm gonna finish up the page in this stream, and I guess I'll probably end up starting the next page. I don't know how much time it's gonna take me to do that, finish up this page, but I'm sure I'll have plenty of time left to like start the next design, which will be this one. You know, she has this blonde hair with a black and brown leather, which is gonna be super cool, man, because this is definitely a new thing. And yeah, look at the white guns, these ivory guns. So yeah, like interesting color scheme here, and yeah, definitely colors that are more in line with her friend John. Did she have white guns? What color was John's guns? Jean's guns. What's her name? Jean? Okay, she had black guns. Okay. But yeah, you can see how the color schemes, and even her, she had some really nice concept art as well. I'm not going to be doing her character. I'm just going to stick with Bayo for now, and once I get done with the Bayo stuff, I'll move back to my original concept art. But yeah, there's a ton in here with all the characters, even the angels and things like that. They got more of regular character designers to do like the angels and things like that. Like obviously the human characters kind of got more fashion design treatment. But yeah, the angels and monsters and demons and whatever, you can see they had like regular, I shouldn't say regular, but you know what I mean, like your typical character design. Not necessarily, you know, fashion design and character design are two different things. That's why it's so interesting that they got a fashion designer to do the character art. It's kind of, you know, the whole reason why I bought this book. And anyways, gonna finish up the page for this design, and then we'll probably end up starting this, and we'll see where I'm at by the time I'm done with that. And yeah, here's where we left off. And I messed around, man. I've been drawing these squares in ink, and that started back in Inktober, and it made sense then because it was like, all right, don't use pencil. So I kind of got used to the idea. I have one more page with ink squares on it, but after that, I jumped back to pencil. You can see how it's like way lighter and things like that. So you know, with the next two pages, I'm gonna finish this one up, gonna throw the black and brown leather, blonde hair, ivory gun design on this page, and then, you know, moving forward from there, at least until October, if I'm, you know, do the whole Inktober thing again, I'm gonna stick with pencil stuff just because it's getting annoying having to erase these lines. I feel like it's kind of a good thing because I'm enjoying my artwork enough now to the point where it's like, all right, these stupid boxes are getting in the way of me, you know, making a decent drawing. So, but I like the box concept. Like I like how I'm able to kind of organize and break down my illustrations to these boxes, and frame them. You know what I mean? Give all of the work and studies here a framing. So yeah, I got kind of like 3 ideas that I kind of want to go with, and
Yeah.
to finish off this page. And they're gonna be relatively small, quick drawings. So I don't know how long I'm gonna be at it with these.
Beat stick that she can take
Yeah.
out enemies. But yeah,
But yeah, man, let's
yeah, like it's weird.
get into it. Let me.
I know that they had to do something to get us a gear tutorial in this game, but it's strange that it had to happen in this manner.
Yeah, she has because she's clearly like highly trained and
Yeah.
capable and can fight.
Certainly has the training to be able to run away from a dinosaur. I would think.
Yeah, and it is. It's just basically a T-Rex, right?
Yeah.
So
There we go.
you end up running back, or
Okay.
Faye ends up running back to try and help her. He tries to just fight the thing with the bare fist. That's not working. And then Saiken shows up
Got
with the repaired
stuff in the way.
land crab helicopter carrying the well-tall.
Oh, that's why I got stuff in the way.
Of course,
Okay.
it's, I don't wanna
I got a video rendering in the background, so I have my laptop open, and usually I just throw a bunch of junk on top of my laptop while I do these streams. But yeah,
It shows the land
it's
crab
not
kind of hovering over into the forest, and as it lowers, the camera swoops in front of sight to reveal that's who it is. It's a really
Okay.
cool moment of like the good guy showing up the last moment to save the day. It's kind of one of the first times this game really gets the blood pumping from like an action perspective, or like a shonen anime perspective. Because it does a lot, and this is the first time it kind of does it.
So the junk that Sutton had been tinkering with was the land crab for this exact purpose, right?
Yes.
Yes.
That he maybe knew this was going to happen, or could read the tea leaves and knew he would need it fixed soon.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah.
So yeah, so he shows
So
up.
that's
he gives
that
you
way.
the gear, you get
So
inside of it.
that
At this
way.
point, if you're, and I described in kind of in detail how you unlock death blows in this game in my review of the game. It's very obtuse. The game never explains it to you. But essentially, like I'm not gonna go over it. Just go watch my review if you want to know how it works.
Yeah.
But it's possible to have unlocked Faye's first death blow at this point, which is Raijin, I think.
I think so.
Which is triangle lines. But the gears have like corresponding death blows. They're not the exact same combination of buttons though. So like the first death blow in the that corresponds with Raijin, I forget what it's called, it's some other word. But you press triangle twice. If you've gotten 1 point, you have to like accumulate a battle point or something like that first. But anyways, you can do some pretty sweet damage to this dinosaur and kill it if you unlock that death blow. It's not like it's very hard to kill.
Okay, so
I
there's
think all the battle
that.
weapons have been pretty much almost.
Yeah, this is mostly a tutorial here.
Yeah. So, anyways, you beat it. They have one more kind of camp out scene. Faye's asleep, or at least pretending to be. And Saitan is kind of speaking with Ellie. And again, it's made pretty obvious he knows not who specifically she is, but where she comes from, like who she's with.
And yeah, what I like about
they're
this
doing.
design is the
He's kind of like trying to, encourage her to leave. And
this giant collar. I like that the jacket is a little shorter
Yeah.
than it
Also
was
speaks
on
her-
previous
when he's trying to identify her. He speaks
design.
Yeah.
fake language to her in order to get that going. And I also thought it was kind of interesting, like right before they go to sleep, like as they're kind of debriefing after the Rankar Dragon battle, and Ellie's still passed out, like Saitan and Faye still decide to have like an ideological sparring match when they're talking about like the nature of power.
Yes.
Just before they go to bed, because of course Saitan identifies the robot family as Veltal, and we now know that what it's called at this point in the game. And Faye, he agrees with Saitan's assertion that they need to protect themselves with this newfound power. Faye says, quote, but its power goes beyond what is necessary. Does one really need the power to destroy everything?
Sutton doesn't respond.
Well, he does respond, like he doesn't respond directly.
Yeah.
But like Xenogears never misses an opportunity to like facilitate any sort of ideological sparring or anything of that nature. So he just kind of addresses him directly by saying, Faye, using power or being used by power, is that not the problem of the heart? If humans do not use their power for wrong, it can be a good thing. I believe such power can help us. So it kind of Saitan's taking the position that like we humans need to try to acquire, not only do we try to acquire power, but we also try to use that power for good. Whereas Faye is like that power in and of itself is unnatural and bad. And therein lies kind of the conflict between what Satan's going through internally throughout the game and kind of the nature of power and the structures of power that will, the many structures of power that we will encounter throughout the game.
Satan also tells Faye the fight was remarkable and no other gear could have defeated that, this level 1 boss.
I know,
It's like
right?
when I would hit like a single and my dad would go, whoa, you're probably the best hitter on the baseball team.
Oh my
Good
god.
job."
That was a really funny line, and I felt totally unnecessary too, because it just felt so
Yeah.
like clearly
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
Like obviously
Go.
other gears and stuff that you fight later in the game are more powerful than this thing, and there's no reason why they wouldn't have been able to kill this freaking T-Rex in a
Yeah.
forest. But anyway, yeah, good stuff. So Ellie ends up leaving in the middle of the night, but Faye, of course, was awake and did hear some of the conversation. And so this is where I think the next day, as they're getting ready to leave, they see like a giant
Hello.
ship fly overhead, and this is where Saitan sort of like reiterates some of the
Get that ready.
like the political background that we
Yeah.
got earlier.
He identifies that ship as a Gembler ship.
Right.
And then he specifically mentions, he says that Gemblers, the special forces from the sacred empire of Solaris, which is our first mention of Solaris in this game. And then Faye wonders if Ellie was from the Gembler force, and Satan suspects so.
Yeah.
It's also important to note that Ellie cited scripture saying shepherds able to control the surface-dwelling lambs and possessing the right to give life and death unto them as they see fit is her justification for wanting to slay surface dwellers. And then if you're talking about overt symbolism, she tells Sidon she was taught at Jugend, which, if you look up the terminology for that, is the Hitler Youth program.
Oh, wow.
So they're laying the fascist stuff on pretty thick here.
Yeah, I forgot about that. And that's interesting, too, that you bring that up, because there was, during that conversation, during the campfire the night before, Sidon was, he was kind of wondering aloud why Ellie was different, because apparently he knows the nature of these people, of these non-surface dwellers, and he's like, well, a normal one of you would have, just killed us because we are, basically, I think they refer to them as domesticated animals.
Right.
I think is how they refer to the lambs, and Sidon is pointing out that Ellie.
Hey, yeah, here we go again with the what I was talking about when I was working on the design with the bent elbow and not knowing what to do with a puffy sleeve there. Now I can just kind of take what I learned from that and apply it here.
It's foreshadowing, and it's ambiguous. That's one of the things that's hard to parse at this point in time.
Yeah. Well, I think that actually carries us up to where we had said we were going to stop this week as we exit Blackmail and you
Yeah.
are heading into Ave. And that first town in the distance, that's Dazzle, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
Dazzle or Dazzle, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. I think we said Dazzle.
It's any way you want it to be.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
Yeah,
everyone.
you probably already know this, but if people correct you on the pronunciation, we live our truth. You pronounce it how you want to until we get to
I totally gave up on that. Like, my initial run of the Final Fantasy podcast, right, which was on our archive channel, I tried to dig into a little bit of maybe this is how this makes sense. And then when revisiting or re-uploading it to the main channel, I just I just give up. Like, pronounce it however you want, I don't care.
Yeah, in our Final Fantasy podcast, we had the Kistis Twistis conversation, but ultimately we just went with the one that we liked better.
Yeah.
We were just like, that's the one we're going to say, so sorry.
Yeah, this is why I like Saitan, and I would prefer Titus to
go.
Final Fantasy X to Titus, which is apparently what it is, but whatever.
I'm Team Titus.
Yeah, I think it was, I heard a commercial or something that said Titus at one point in time. I was like, oh, then Titus.
And the voice actor, I forget his name right now.
Ratchet. James Arnold.
Yeah, Arnold Taylor. Yeah. He says it's Titus too. It's like, come on, please, that thing is so good. Anyways, good stuff, guys. Thanks for joining today. Do you have anything else that you picked up on or that you'd like to say before we wrap up here?
I did have one
Go.
more thing. When Faye is leaving,
Get her
one
sleeves,
thing
get her
that
gloves.
The camera frames, like he looks at Weltall and turns his back on it, but the camera pulls down and showcases Weltall staring back at him, kind of watching his back, never getting him out of his sight, which I think is another instance of like the game doesn't have a lot of big directorial moments
There we
with
go.
polygons, so that felt very intentional.
Yeah, I can definitely see
Yeah, would she have the bow tie down
This stuff-
here?
I
Now, what do I
did
wanna
not
do with
expect
the
that
hair?
I think we can pretty close to 3
Has a
hours.
hair up
I
here.
was expecting that once we moved to the
then-
weekly schedule, we'd get down to like an hour and a half a piece. And that's just never the case. But I appreciate you guys staying on for the whole time and talking with me. It was a very fascinating conversation.
Thanks for letting us pinch it.
Yeah, we appreciate that, and this is probably not any solace to you, but like as we went deeper and deeper on our podcast, our episodes got longer and longer as well.
Yeah.
So good luck
It's
with
just,
all this.
there's just, the game is just so dense, and that's part of what's so great about it. It has so much replayability, right? Is every time you dig back into it, you can catch something that you didn't catch before. And that's part of why I love these Squaresoft JRPGs from the 90s, especially the late 90s PlayStation era. There's just, and you guys just did Chrono Cross, it's very similar.
Yeah.
So anyways, everybody should go and check out Retrograde Amnesia. I forgot that you guys had done Terra Nigma as well, but is that an exclusive thing to your Patreon?
Yes, for Patreon we have covered Terra Nigma and Parasite Eve as our miniseries. We've also done 11 extra Xenogears episodes.
Radical Dreamers.
We covered Radical Dreamers, which I love Radical Dreamers, and we covered the Xenogears Perfect Works, where we did a goofy little
There we
quiz
go.
show format where Eric wrote how many
Just do
questions?
that with the hair. Some nice framing.
500 multiple choice questions for me, and I answered
So that way I know what to do with the bow. Like I had to draw half the bow last time when I did this. So just wanted to make sure I didn't have to do that.
How did we get retro? How did we get retrogradeamnesia.com? How did a scientist not own that? I don't know, but we have it now.
That is phenomenal. Go check out
Which is-
retrogradeamnesia.com. Go check out their YouTube channel. Look them up on Spotify or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Check out their Patreon as well for some additional analysis of some really, really excellent games. Terra Nigma is one of my favorites. So.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful game.
Actually, your Terra Nigma video was kind of what made me. I was aware of it, but it made me more aware of what it was. And I watched like 5 minutes of it. And I was like, we need to cover this game.
Yeah, it's
that's
pretty deep.
that's where I came up with the idea to do a mini series for the Patreon, and then so I watched a little bit of it. We did our series, and then went back and watched your full video, and that's one of my favorite ones that you've done. So
Terra Nigma
Yeah.
is a wonderful game. Everyone should play it. And I'm sure we'll cover it sometime too. But anyways, thanks again, fellas. Really appreciate you. Everyone go check out Retrograde Amnesia, and we'll see
Thanks,
you
Mike.
again next week. Peace out. Welcome back to the State of the Art podcast. My name is Mike.
My name's Kason.
And we are joined once again by Chris and Eric from Retrograde Amnesia. Fellas, welcome back. How are you doing today?
good. Thanks for having us back. You can get rid of us soon, but we're back for one more.
At least one more round.
Yes.
There was kind of a question as to whether or not I'd be able to do this like 1 week after
Yeah.
my wife.
Congratulations.
So.
Yeah, congrats.
Oh, thank you.
We have a hard and fast rule on our podcast where
Yeah.
we never record 3 episodes in a row, so that the rule is never do 3. And I also apply that to fatherhood. Never do 3. I have 2, and I'm never going to do 3. So bless you for
Never do
for,
three.
for taking the
Well,
plunge.
4. I mean, I'm going for 4. Right?
Oh, okay.
So,
Well, you know,
I'm not stopping.
once you're outnumbered, then you know.
I know. Then who cares? I'm just
You
little
will,
8.
yeah.
I'll tell you what, though. I mean, that's how humans did it. Most somebody mentioned to me, said, you only have 2 hands, you should only have 2 kids. How can you possibly take care of a third? And I'm like, I don't know, ask every human who lived ever until like 100
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah.
That's how we got to 8 billion people.
Yes, exactly. Just don't put them all on a colony ship with that thing on it.
Exactly. Not a good idea. Okay, so this is a little complicated, but last episode that I recorded with you guys, we actually got all the way up through the Blackmoon Forest, but I cut that episode in half. So in the last episode, we would have talked about Lahan Village all the way through Blackmoon Forest.
Through or
So
just 2?
all the way through it. So
Oh,
now it's
okay.
leading up to getting into Ave territory, going up to Dazzle,
Yeah.
and then getting all the way through to meeting Bart and getting to essentially Pirate.
Okay.
But I think I kind of called it at when you rendezvous.
Once you get
That's it.
You know, this
So
is
there's
so.
that.
It was kind of disappointing because you texted me and you said, "Hey, play up until Yggdrasil," and I was like, sick imbeciles in this game, like the tree of life from ancient Norse, or specifically like English mythology. That is so sweet.
All right,
Makes
now
sense, right?
let's-
Meet in tree life, and like, no, it's like
Final
I was
bit.
so disappointed because I was like, hey, dude, I don't know when I'm gonna reach this tree Mike's talking about, but we're in a cave for the past like 3 hours.
By the time you guys are done with this, you are going to love the Stand Cruiser Jaeger Assault. We love it.
Okay,
You will
okay.
grow to love it as well. Every
Well,
fight on that ship has a backstory.
Unfortunately, my expectations were set at a different level.
Also, I guess you could look forward to Xenoblade 2, where they actually have the true
I've
Yeah.
seen the
Xenoblade
images
in
around
it.
it.
So
That's exciting.
we'll get to that someday, I guess.
There we go. So that way.
Okay, so we just left Blackmoon Forest, and so Saitan and Faye are heading to Dazzle or Dazzle. I'm not sure how it's supposed to be pronounced, but it's that first city in the desert there, which is serving as more or less the like center of operations for the excavations that are happening in Ave. And if you remember back to the opening kind of title call, the paragraphs of text, both Ave and Kislev are excavating these gears or technology from like an ancient civilization, and they take
And
those
what
to an
else?
institution, a religious institution
The
called
guns.
Ethos, to repair them.
Didn't
And
forget the
Ethos kind of decides
guns.
which country, gets which things, and so they have kind of a firm hand in like manipulating how this war goes, right? On top of that, you have the Dembler's force, which is helping Ave sort of like even the odds and now sort of get a little bit of momentum over Kislev in this war. So, with that kind of background in place, we find our way to Dazzle. Saitan is saying that they need to find parts to repair the Veltal gear that Faye has been piloting, right?
Yeah.
All this time.
What is it pronounced that way?
Veltal is a German word, kind of like Weiss.
Yeah, yeah,
from
yeah.
English, right? I've been saying Veltal the whole time, but it's a mistake. It's technically Veltal.
By the way, Dazzle is Daji, so Dazzle.
Oh,
Well,
no.
in the Japanese,
No.
it's Daji. I don't know what it is, but that's what he's injecting.
So, there's a couple of examples of Aizuchi that I wanted to point to here
Yeah.
that kind of gave me this sense on my initial playthrough that Faye is kind of just not a smart person.
You know, it's not just the Aizuchi though, because what is it, Satan, who he kind of explains, at least at one point in the forest at the fire, where he's like, oh well, he doesn't know much outside of his little village. He literally knows nothing outside of his village. Like so it's not just you would think that way of him, not just through the Aizuchi, but also through the way Satan kind of like refers to him as like being unacquainted with anything, basically.
Yeah, just like ignorant to the
Yeah.
outside world or whatever.
Yeah.
But, I mean, in the forest, in Blackmoon Forest, Saitan explained we need to repair this gear. It's like the knee joint or whatever, there's a part on it. So we're going to go here and we're going to find a part. And then they arrive there.
All right.
And he says, okay, we go to the kind of like the Ethos headquarters here, and
Yeah.
they'll have the part we need.
Yeah,
maybe. And then Faye is repeating, repair Veltal?
And so
Yes, that's why we're here.
it's a question mark. It's marked with a question, right?
Yeah.
But and I don't know this specifically, but what I believe he was likely saying is, what if this stop, or what if this nah? Something like if he says nah, then that would be not a question. If you translate it to English, it's technically a question,
Yeah.
but it's not so much a question to the person. It's more a question you're asking the question to yourself, but out loud, like, oh, so this is so at Welltown, repair Welltown, huh? Like it. But when you write it down, you kind of have to put a question because it only makes sense that it's technically a question, but it doesn't mean he's asking the question necessarily.
This
So,
is
you
also
know,
the days like
go ahead,
before
go ahead.
there's actually a quest log available for players, so reminding the player of some objective, no matter how nebulous it may be, can kind of keep them on track toward a goal or destination.
Okay, so kind of a gameplay reason for it. Now, that's
All
really
right.
good because I am not a fan of how quickly you get into battles within the random encounters within this game.
Oh, you mean like
So,
You walk for like
what do I wanna do? Light colors
10
first?
seconds battle. Yeah, they kind of
Oh
right
man,
yeah.
my
It's so quick, it can take you a long time to traverse it pretty short.
my
a pretty short
desk
distance,
is
and by then it's like, well,
crowded.
there was at least two examples when I was in this nighttime cabin where I got out of the battle and I went into like the menu to change a piece of equipment or
Okay.
check my status on death blows or something like that. And I went out and I literally took one step forward and another encounter. And I don't know.
My desk is so crowded. Give me a second, guys. I'm sorry.
Changing the camera angle.
Try to get my bearings here.
But just shifting the camera can also initiate a random encounter. Have you guys heard that?
I've experienced close to that, but usually it's like kind of when you're like stuck on the edge of like some geometry, your character's kind of sliding down or something like that, where it
Okay.
feels like
Which
there's a
happens
battle
all the
loading.
time, by the way.
Yeah. You know what?
Games,
All right.
Yeah, every
Let's
time
do
I go
this.
back to this game, I think about how much I hate the encounter rate, but every time I start playing it, like it's never as bad as I remember every single time.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are some pretty tough moments.
Those among us still playing on the original PlayStation, you can actually hear the disc stop spinning before the battle loads, so you
Oh,
can kind of get a preview and prepare for it,
Yeah.
so you don't want to make that jump. Also,
That's
is it
interesting.
threaten your suspension of disbelief that Faye, the country boy from the small town, is now slaughtering Sandmen without any argument?
Yeah.
You know,
That's just kind of and that's a difficulty of I guess this JRPG
Yeah,
structure, the fact that there are random encounters.
Yeah.
This is actually something I read too, that was maybe like a regret or something they wish they had had more time to change later on. And it had to do with like the pastoral feel of the game that he wanted to get away from the further they got into it, and that he didn't have time to go back and change for the introduction so much. But it was like, it would make more sense if the enemies that you fought were not monsters in the sense like in other RPGs, right? Like where the world is littered with monsters, and
Yeah.
in this case, just like citizens of Abe, I would think, just like Sandman and stuff.
just people that need to
That
die.
they should all be wells, or like maybe it's wells, I'm not sure, but wells, or just other gears and like robots and things like that. And so,
All right, there's that.
probably
Now
elements
where
the enemy choice, I guess,
here.
the enemies you encounter in the groupings might not make the most sense. Like forest elves and things like that, where if they had had time to adjust it, they probably would have just replaced most of the monsters with wells.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that later.
And
what the wells
that's
means, but,
that.
it would make more sense if those were primarily the enemies you fought.
There are a few spaces in this game where it feels like the monsters that you fight are from a particular ecosystem, but there's also other ones that don't make any sense. Like the stalactite caves, I think one that works because there's sandmen walking down there. They've got their gears with them. There's the
Sure, because
occasional-
they're excavating
Yeah,
ruins and all
yeah,
that stuff.
but- But there, you'll notice later in the game there are some stuff like why is this dinosaur in this spaceship? That kind of stuff.
Exactly. So, anyways, there's not too much that I took note of aside from Big Joe
Yes.
and some of the things that he says in Ave, but I want to pass it to you guys for any notes that you took on Dazzle and
All right.
anything that you thought was interesting to bring up there.
I do get a little bit of a kind of the Star Wars vibe from this because
Yes.
we're traveling through the desert. Obviously, we're fighting the Sandman as we just alluded to, and we're going to kind of an outpost of kind of I don't know. It's part of a state, but there is a certain level of anarchy that happens here, and it's Faye, the young guy with powers. He doesn't know how to manifest them, along with Scythen, who is his mentor, who is holding very important information back from him at this point in time. So it's got that kind of Luke Skywalker and Ben Kenobi traveling to Mos Eisley feel to it.
It does, it really does, yeah.
I had a couple things. One, something I didn't notice the first 2 times I played this game is every city has its own crest, including Dazzle. When you first walk in, its crest is emblazoned on the archways of the entrance and exit. And if you look throughout the rest of the game, I'm not going to say their names, but the other cities also have their own crests or flags. Second, Dazzle, I think, is the first place where you encounter a demi-human. There's like a moose guy in the second building on the left.
Yeah, there's also like a gopher guy that's in the middle of town as well.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And then there's also some like local politicking. The thing in the center of town is actually a fountain that controls the water in the desert, and there's
Yeah.
some guy that manages the water house that mentions how the ethos kind of takes priority over the resources and drains them, and they don't have access to their water. But he also says the ethos greatly improved the water system, so neutral as to whether or not the ethos is a bad or good influence on this town.
Yeah, I noticed that because you go into that little building where they're like controlling the water system, and then right next door to that, there's like a little family, and there's a woman in there who's like, "Oh, they shut off our water again." Like,
Yes.
Yeah.
they must be needing it for some kind of gear or something or other. And it's like, oh, so these people basically, their utilities are being controlled by the ethos, and
Yeah.
so their water can get shut off at any time. That's kind of like a scary thing, especially when you live in a desert like that. Like the
Oh,
water
yeah.
all of a sudden gets shut off. And it's like,
Well, when you're in the desert, whoever controls the water controls everything.
yeah,
Controls the people, controls life, and everything.
Yeah, it's a preview of the year 2050.
The water and spice.
Yeah, the water and the spice. Did you guys get there's an optional scene that you can get if you're kind of roaming the outskirts of town where Faye will stop and say, "Hey Doc, what's that?"
yeah, yeah, and then it shows
And you see an
the
excavation.
yeah, you see
Yeah, I
like,
saw that.
basically a gear being like lifted out
A
of the
freaking
ground.
huge.
And
It looked bigger than a normal one.
And it's not it's not a rendered thing. It's like a bitmap. It's like a pre-rendered
Yeah.
scene that we're looking at, and you don't get a ton of that in the game. There are some certain areas where those kind of pre-rendered bitmaps, for lack of a better term, are used as backgrounds. But like this is the first one where it's just the scene and they're showing you something. I thought that was unique. I've not seen another one in this game.
Yeah, it's interesting that like you can only initiate it by kind of like hugging like the inner side of the
Yeah.
wall that like borders the town. You kind of hug that wall around. There's like, just I guess I don't know, a specific tile or something that where you land on that, it'll like initiate this little cutscene where they talk about the excavations that are happening. So kind of a cool little thing there. And then you go into the tavern and there's a character named Big Joe in there, and this is kind of just a rule of thumb for Japanese role-playing games, but if a character has a portrait, it usually means they're more important. They're gonna
Big Joe's
play
very
some
important.
role. Rather than everybody else who does not have a character portrait, it's just an NPC. Though I did find that the NPC dialogue generally in Dazzle all was pretty it was all pretty good in terms of either like, foreshadowing or giving you a hint of what you're going to do next, or like I found most of the NPC dialogue to be like really thoughtfully done. It's not just like a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah.
And so I think the town, and I love the town theme too. All of Mitsu's music is excellent. He's my favorite composer, games composer of all time. Big fan of Mitsuda, but like
Yeah, the song that plays here specifically is really, really, really well done.
yeah, it's awesome.
It's unique to this town too. I don't think it's repeated anywhere else in the game.
Yeah, and so I kind of copied down some of or one of the lines of dialogue that Big Joe says over in the bar that I thought might be like pretty interesting foreshadowing. I'm not going to spoil anything, of course. Kason has not played the game, but it's something that I found interesting as playing this, having played the game before. Because you have to talk to him a few times. It has like 3 different lines of dialogue, and then he'll cycle those 3. But I think on the 3rd, he says, "You think you know about yourself? I could introduce myself right now, and by tomorrow I'll be a different person. If you didn't understand that, I'll repeat." And hit is his drunk, right?
Yeah.
Don't count your chickens before they hatch. So you think you know about yourself? I can introduce myself right now, and by tomorrow I'll be a different person. I thought that was interesting, and this is, I think, the second time now, because you mentioned this last time too, how the drunk guy in the tavern in Lahan also had like this really important piece of foreshadowing.
I mean, have you ever talked to a drunk guy at a tavern before? In real life, they typically have foreshadowing.
Yeah, it's like, and this is kind of a trope with JRPGs too, but it's like, if something is a myth or a legend that somebody dismisses, they'll like tell you the legend, and they'll be like, yeah, but that's just a legend.
Yeah,
Don't
well,
pay attention to that.
we see that happen in this playthrough
Yeah.
specifically.
Yes. Yes.
Or if it's a drunk guy in a tavern who seems to be talking nonsense, they're usually 100% correct, and it's
Yeah.
exactly the case. It's always true.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But the
Anyway.
idea is that the alcohol brings out your inner self, right?
Sure.
So you drink and you say
Right.
the inner, you expose
There's no
your inner self
inhibitions. So
Yes,
You're,
yes.
you're speaking the truth when you're like
when you're drunk. Yeah.
or-
Yeah.
Everybody's trying to be Oscar. Was it Oscar Wilde who drank absinthe when he wrote?
It's a possibility.
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, that's the thing that shit.
Also, at some point, Seitan says about Big Joe, this man likes to make his presence felt, which is also going to be primarily true for Big Joe throughout the rest of this game.
Yeah.
Right.
And we'll see a lot more. So this is just the first encounter. So I copied another line from another NPC who says, "I wonder who built these ruins. Some say an ancient civilization which ruled this land long ago built them. But after looking at the results of this geologic test, I have my doubts." It's a perfect example of, again, the archetype.
Some say long ago. Yeah.
Where it's always the truth, right? The NPCs always tell you myths and legends, and they always doubt them, but they're always the truth. So they're planting a setup here about an ancient civilization that built the ruins that they're excavating all of these years.
Yeah, she has this butterfly bow. That's what's kind of cool about this
So
giant
you
bow
go into the
design is that it's like
they mostly repair civilian gear.
it's like a butterfly, and obviously Bayonetta has like some butterfly imagery.
And so
It's a part of her thing.
I guess I'm gonna have to go out into the desert to where these ruins are at and see if I can like find, the part that we need from either an excavation or if there are battles that have happened and there are gears that has been abandoned or whatever. I can like scavenge or something.
Because apparently, so this site, because you mentioned that there's like both sides, Ave and what's the other one? Kislev. They often have skirmishes right along the border there because they're both trying to access the resources that are underground. And because of that, there's just a kind of like battlefield littered with military pieces and different gears and just parts just all over the place. So he thinks he can find what he needs over there.
Yeah. So he takes off and
In a-
leaves
in a-
Faye behind.
Does he take the buggy? Is that what happens?
I think he
takes the
rents
buggy?
some
Yeah.
kind of like desert vehicle.
And basically immediately Faye is like, I wonder if he's okay. I better go out and check. It's like,
And
yeah,
yeah,
they just split up and then both went alone. Like, what did
You're
you do?
about to say what I was going to say. Go
What is
ahead.
it?
Oh, yeah. If you talk to the guy who rented you the sand buggy, he's like, you should not have let him go by yourself or by yourself.
Yes,
And
that's
so
true,
the player knows what to do. So, of course, Faye runs out into the desert with no vehicle, no supplies,
You know what's funny?
nothing. Just
I
runs straight
heard, we talked to the guy, he's like, nobody should go out there alone by themselves. I guess I took a little bit different to that, maybe I read it wrong, but I took that to be like, we should go out by ourselves.
So you decided to wait until now?
And it's like, well, I didn't know exactly what to do, but I figured I knew, because of this is a video game, I knew I was gonna have to go look for him. But, I did not read that guy's dialogue and think immediately, and it might be my fault, I may have read it wrong, but I felt like he was telling me not to go out alone.
Yeah. And you can go talk to Big Joe again too. He'll kind of encourage you to leave too.
Yeah.
Like, hey, your friend out there all by himself. Like, you better not abandon your friends, especially for big friends. So anyway.
There's also a weird conversation on when Faye and Seitan go to the thinking bridge. When Faye sees a window
Alright.
for escape, and he's like, well, I guess they don't have the parts. We probably just can't fix Weltall. And
Right.
Seitan continually manipulates him to just push forward. He says, oh, well, you probably want to get Weltall far away from the village, don't you?
Yeah.
And
Yes, because the people are gonna fight, and they might destroy life on Earth again, and it's like, wait, wasn't it already like completely new? Like,
yeah, is he
who cares if they destroy it again, but Satan, he's got
Yeah.
the logic on his side,
That
and
always
he's
felt
like,
suspicious.
alright, let's do it.
Yeah. Very
I
suspicious.
also there was a line that Seitan says in that exchange that I like. He says, "Anyway, the fear is often worse than the danger itself. We should not let such fears hold us back."
Yes.
So he's definitely really nudging Faye forward. And and even when Faye's expressing like, oh, like I just kind of want to go back to Lahan and just like help him rebuild and stuff. He's like, well, you can do that if you want, but let me give you all of these reasons why you should actually keep going. He's like definitely nudging you forward. He's there's something going on with Cyclone. And I mentioned this last time when we talked, and I felt even more this way this time. And I kind of have two feelings about this. Like, one, it's been probably 4 years since I played the game. So part of me, and it's very long game. And like you said a couple of different times, the game in some way sort of expects you to remember something that they like dropped at the beginning 50 hours later. And there's just so many things you can forget or just like lose track of because there's so much going on. So part of this is probably me just forgetting a lot of things. But the other part of me is like, I feel really dumb for not having seen how heavy-handed this foreshadowing is. And I don't know if that's just the nature of the second playthrough. It's just like you play it the second time, and it's just like you just see it all. And that's why I'm glad we have Case in here to give feelings about what you feel about Cyctan, because I wanted to ask you specifically about that. Like, what do you feel about that character right now? What are your feelings about him?
Well, so I'm looking at this from, just because of what I know about the game, I'm looking at this from like an archetypal perspective of
Sure.
like he is the savant, he is the wise person who's going to lead us. He's the Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's going to lead us along the path, Gandalf style, right, to where we need to go. Now it's obvious he knows a lot more than he's letting on, but to me, it's like he knows more. One of the big things in the Old Forest, I said the Old Forest, Blackman, because I just mentioned Gandalf.
Yeah.
Okay, Blackman Forest is that he speaks that language, the Ellie speaks, and she lives in a whole like completely different place, speaks a whole different language, and he speaks it, and so it's like, hey, this guy's been around, and he even says, oh, I know more about the world than most. Let's just leave it at that. And that's all he says. So it's like, okay, this guy has seen the world, right? And he's leading us somewhere, but like is there a specific question?
No, I'm glad. Okay, that was big. That actually clarified.
He seems to me like the wise sage who's leading us along.
That clarifies something to me. I kind of remembered now what I thought back when I played the game for the first time too, and I think I did just kind of feel like you just said, Saitan he's well traveled, or he's
he's like
been around,
Gandalf, right?
like he knows about things because he's been around the world or something like that. I guess was my assumption.
But do you trust him as a first-time player?
Well, the fact that you're asking that kind of makes me wonder. But
Well, when we went back to this game for our podcast, we didn't really remember how it paid off, and so we were very, very mistrustful of him just because of the way he's acting this whole time. So.
There is very good reason to distrust him. One of them being, so whenever when Ellie tried to get info from him, he wouldn't procure any. He's constantly asking questions, so one and more. But when someone asks about him, there's nothing. And there's another part later on in this section that we played through where we get to ask him some questions, and he doesn't answer our questions. So I see there is reason to be suspicious of him because he is very evasive, but at the same time, he is like very helpful. So
Also,
I
have you seen
don't
how
have any
this guy
qualms
is?
with him at the moment, despite the fact that, like Obi-Wan or Gandalf, he has had many experiences and knows things that I don't. Like, for instance, with Obi-Wan Kenobi, he kept from Luke that Luke's father was Darth Vader. He kept that from Luke on purpose, right? And when he revealed it, Luke wasn't stoked about it, but Luke kind of just didn't believe him, I guess. But it didn't make me think that Obi-Wan was a bad guy.
Yeah.
It was like, Obi-Wan hid some stuff, but probably with good reason. Likewise, Gandalf with Bilbo, he's hiding tons of stuff. Like Bilbo, if it weren't for me, you would have died 50 times over on this trip, right? And they kind of hinted that within the movie. One of the nice touches of the Hobbit movie is where he opens the contract and it falls to the ground and it's got all the provisions in case you lose your limbs, in case of death or whatever, dismemberment. This is like what you're entitled to receive should they recover the treasure. And it's funny, but it's almost like in the movie they're like, Gandalf, can you promise I'll come back? And he's like, no, I can't. But that doesn't make him a bad guy. There's reason to be suspicious of Gandalf
with The Hobbit, because in The Hobbit, Gandalf is being very pushy to get
It's like
Bilbo
he
to
knows
go.
something about Bilbo specifically.
Yeah.
And he's pushing him to do something that probably no one should ever push someone to do.
Yeah.
You get, hey, you really want to slay that dragon, don't you? I don't know, there's a dragon out there. It would be nice if you could just like go and steal its gold. Wouldn't that be great? Like,
I don't know much
who
about
does that?
I don't know much about Lord of the Rings, but if you just took the conversation that you just had about Gandalf and Bilbo and inserted Faye and Saiton, it would work because the relationship is very similar.
It
There
would.
is a power that Faye has that he doesn't understand. Saiton seems to know more than Faye and more than the player, and he's trying to not just harness it. I don't think he's trying to correctly harness it and make sure that what happened in Lahand Village doesn't happen again. But also, he's very very curious about what the nature.
Yes. Likewise, Gandalf with the ring with Frodo, where he's just like, I think I know what that is, but you keep it for now. And I'll go do some research. And it's like, maybe Frodo, anyways. But there's a lot of, we can go down a lot of different places, because this archetype is used, like, all over the place.
It's the hero's
but-
journey. Like,
Exactly. It's a hero's journey show. Joseph Campbell talks a lot about this specific type of, character. But one thing I did want to mention is that Satan, every now and then, we often will see him outside, away from us, where we leave and he's there, and he's just kind of like, he'll say a few words to himself. Like, so, could it be? Something like that.
My favorite
That happens
is like
several times.
Cruel Dark Destiny of God. Like he's
Yeah.
watching Faye in the gear back in the Han, and he's like, I guess he's kind of talking to Faye at the same time. But there's two things he
Here
says.
we
there,
go.
Like, oh no, if he awakens here, it could be like a disaster.
Oh, and they put he in quotes. Yeah,
And then
I thought that was interesting.
He's
Yeah.
kind of talking to Dan, but also kind of to himself, like Faye is bound by the cruel dark destiny of God.
To Dan.
Yeah, it's like this hardcore like
Yeah.
line from Saitan that
He does that a lot.
says so often.
And really, that's like Gandalf when he's like, so be it. Or like,
Yeah.
anyways, there are lines like that that are very comfortable.
Senator here says the dialogue has a strange relationship with M dashes and quotes that never really fall into a comprehensible rhythm, but they're there nevertheless.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of those. They're
Yeah.
in the Japanese as well.
There's
They'll
some
do these
examples.
brackets, like the greater than less than brackets.
There's some
And it's-
examples coming up once we actually like get the graph and stuff, and Saitan talking about like the time of the gospel, that where it's
Yes.
like it's weird. I don't know why.
The time of the gospel, yeah, and it's like you could just say time of the gospel. I read the Japanese; they're in the little quote things. It's weird. It's interesting.
Yeah. Anyways, so you leave, you go after Saitan in the desert. You're kind of following these gears as they're like downing through, like hoping
Yeah.
to lead you the right way. He steals a motorcycle. I love those shots.
That was
They're
great.
really cool. He's like ramping up
Yeah.
dunes and like.
I was wondering. I was like, are they gonna let us ride that motorcycle? And
But I just got like this sense. It's almost like a nostalgic sense of just coolness, right? Like how
Yeah.
cool these games were at the time. Like
Yeah,
it just,
yeah.
like it reminded me of like the motorcycle chase sequence in Final Fantasy VII.
Yes,
How cool it was.
exactly.
When
Yeah.
Tifa is like motioning everyone forward to jump in the truck, and then Cloud just shows up on that motorcycle, like up the stairs, like
Yeah.
breaks out the window. These games just had this like coolness to them, the style. It was so awesome. And I really got that sense from a lot of the stuff happening here with the gears and with him like stealing the motorcycle. And it kind of also feels a little bit like Return of the Jedi. Those like I don't know what the
Those
yeah,
spears,
the
yeah,
spears
the
that go through the-
Yeah.
it's just really cool. It just like took me to a time in my childhood, like how cool things were back then. But he steals a motorcycle, is still looking for him, and then Saitan kind of just shows up in Velthal.
Yeah, while we're being attacked by some other.
I think there was a very specific event that happened on Faye's journey out there before he encountered.
Oh, we saw
Saitan.
like a
Oh, go for
saucer, right?
Oh yes, the thing
Yeah.
passing overhead. Yes.
Like the ground rumbles and you think it's going to be another gear because gears have been hopping by. And then there's a pull-out
Yeah.
shot from the sky of a force field protected UFO hovering in the desert. And then
Yeah,
it's
it's
over
crazy.
where the camera switches to Faye's point of view instead, looking up at it, and it just disappears. Like I don't even
You
think,
know-
like Faye runs after it, but that's it.
That force field around it too. I did want to add. I vaguely can see it in my mind. It looks like a dreidel. ancient Jewish
Yeah.
toy.
Yeah.
But the forest field around it has like a bump on the bottom and on top. It looks very interesting. But also very not too long before that moment in the forest, we saw another random giant spaceship kind of fly over. Huge.
Yeah, that was the Kepler
through the
ship,
leaves.
yeah.
Yeah. And so this is multiple times now where we've seen things above us that it seems like Faye has not seen them before. He's like in his little Lahan village, apparently those things didn't fly over there. So wherever he's going to now has high traffic of unusual flying aircraft.
And this time, the guy who knows everything is not with us, unfortunately.
Exactly. So we just
But-
can't know.
Yeah.
But it's a dreidel. It's a flying dreidel.
There's a lot that they give you.
I also think it's interesting that Faye's first time by himself out in a polygonal environment, they take away your compass. So there's no real direction. I mean, I think if you just walk forward, you'll get there. But I think it is possible
Yeah.
to get to a few more screens before you ultimately reach your destination.
Oh, nice.
I actually did not notice that because
No,
that little
you
compass
didn't.
is always in the corner. So you're
Yeah.
saying in the desert sequence they don't have the compass at all?
Right, it's gone.
Wow.
Is that signifying how you can get lost in the desert?
Well, because if you try to go out there before doing the dazzle sequence, like before going through everything there where Saikan decides he's going to drive out and like try to find parts, if you try to go out in the desert before that, you'll just get lost out there. Like you can't really progress going that way. You hit plot wall, right? So you have to go back to dazzle. So yeah, I did not even notice it.
The salmons look great, by the way. You get out there and you look up top and you're looking around, and the way they render that environment is just beautiful.
Yeah, super cool. So then, Saikan arrives in Beltal. He describes how he has a lot of trouble piloting it. Faye should get in. He keeps pushing him
Yeah,
to pilot the gear. And he's like, I don't want to pilot the gear. I destroyed Muhammad that thing. Get away from me. You don't want it. He's like, no,
No.
you should.
This
Get
is
in.
following the hero's journey so well. I love it because there is within the hero's journey, within Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, he talks about the monument, and one of them is there's always the call to action, right? But one of the kind of hallmarks of the hero's journey, I guess, is that the hero refuses the call to action initially. He refuses it, and he doesn't want to go. It's the same thing with Bilbo, with the Hobbit, and everything. It's like, no, I'm not doing that. And then eventually, curiosity gets the better of you, right? And Graf even mentions this very soon here. It's like you really do want to know, and so you're gonna do it. You know you shouldn't, but you're gonna do it. You're gonna do everything I want you to do. But that is right with the refusal of the call to adventure, which he also does earlier on as well before we go to the forest, because we're like, I'm not getting back in that thing. So there's multiple times where we can refuse, but at some point I'm guessing, well, at some point I'm pretty sure it already happens. We kind of stop refusing, and we're just like, hey, we're gonna keep getting in this thing over and over, and we just we forget it, and then we accept the call to action and can move forward towards the next stage of the hero's journey.
Yeah. And so I guess I failed to mention that the reason it's important that he showed up when he did Saikan with the gear is because there are Ave gears that have kind of like stopped Faye on the motorcycle that he
Yeah.
stole.
And
they're
so
like,
Satan like shoots them, right? Because they're about to kill us.
Yeah.
But he's like, I can't do anything. I can only shoot them. I can't do anything else.
So you get in
Yeah.
it and you fight them. And one thing I took a note of here that I found very hilarious is I love how, because you can do some death blows in the gears at this time. So you can like beat them up and knock them down, and these robots will fall over, and then they'll get up, run back into position, just to die.
That's great. That is so
Yes.
90s. That's so classic.
It's
That
really
happens a
fun.
lot with the 3D rendered enemies. It happens a lot. It happens with the boss that we're gonna fight later with Calamity.
Yeah, it's like bam, 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 you knock it down, and he gets up, he like, rushes back into place and just falls over.
We have no other way to die, guys. So.
I have to get in my position and do my work. Anyways,
love that.
really funny. This, classic 90s. So then, now this is where we're gonna have a lot to talk about, I feel.
Yeah, that's where most of my notes are.
So this is where Graf shows up. And it's the same gear that we saw back in Lahan, right? So there was kind of a gear that was leading the others, and it's specifically a gear that noticed Faye was freaking out when he saw Timothy coming back. And there was a gear that kind of stops and looks down at Timothy, and so Faye's really afraid. No, don't harm them. They have nothing to do with this. Stop. And he's like freaking out. And Graf, the gear that Graf was piloting, took notice of that and specifically turns and gives the order to shoot Timothy. So, like, Graf saw that, anyways, this is the same
So
guy.
he's paying attention to specifically to Faye.
Yeah. The composition of the shot here is really cool, too. He's, like, silhouetted by the giant orange moon.
The moon,
in the
yeah,
background
that's
and stuff.
perfect.
And of course, like, Graf's music comes on. It's there's definitely some Star Wars parallels here. You pointed them out already a little bit with the Sandman and like coming into Mos Eisley, with Dazzle. But there's definitely some Star Wars parallels with Graf too. And I in fear of not wanting to spoil anything, there's certain things I don't want to mention, but I want to like kind of put a note in it to return to it later maybe. But even the music seems to borrow maybe like a couple of notes from like the Imperial March to me. Like it sounds a little bit similar to that. But let me pass this first over to you guys to talk a little bit about this scene and your thoughts on it.
I think it's important to note that most of the time Groff is framed. Part of his whole vibe and entrance is, if you look close, he's riding outside of his own gear.
Yes,
Like
he's like
he
standing on the
essentially
shoulder.
goes right
Right?
there. Yeah.
I
Which is
think-
kind of like a power. Like he didn't need another power move on top of the existing entrance.
Since he's on like a mountain thing, right?
Yeah.
Already.
He's like in a power
And then he's
position.
on top of that. He's even on top of the thing that's on top of the thing.
He's just stacking them.
Yeah, and I think this is the moment when I first played this game as a teenager, where I was like, okay, I'm in. Like as soon as this scene comes on, you kind of theoretically look down at your feet. You're already halfway down the quicksand. You're like, in this game, you have to know who this is and what all these mysteries are. And I love the scene too because we talked about over the course of the past couple episodes is that this game has introduced so many mysteries with the intro scene, with what's going on in Lahane Village, all the stuff that Satan is dropping, but now it's introducing
And Ellie.
yes, and Ellie too, exactly. And now it's introducing a conflict with a really cool bad guy, and I can't get enough of this scene. It gives me chills every time I get here.
It's
I
also-
really. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, his portrait is just kind of hard to figure out when you look at it from a side profile.
Yeah.
Until you see him head on and art extraneous to the game, it's hard to figure out what his deal is visually.
Yeah, I kind of didn't recognize him in a cutscene later that's animated, one of the anime ones, that's within this playthrough. I didn't immediately realize that was Graf just for whatever reason. I don't know why, but it took
There's a section of his armor like under his chin that's kind of empty in black, and I always thought that black portion was like his huge. He had a huge head and that was his mouth, but actually it's just an empty portion of his armor that separates his chin from his neck. So like once I find that frame of reference, I can be like, okay, now I know it. Now I can understand what this guy looks like.
So you looked at his mouth like it was the Scream mask.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I've heard people say that like some of the little decor around his eyes makes it look like he's got like a booger hanging out of his nose or something. But like you just have to. It's like one of those those magic eye pictures that they had in the '90s where you had to kind of like focus your vision in order to
Oh,
actually.
and like go cross-eyed to see it. Yeah.
But he's awesome.
I can
Like,
never do this.
I love this guy.
Yeah, it's a really great scene, conceptually and in terms of the setups that are being dropped here, the new mysteries being unveiled. And I really like it for that reason. The music's really great. The shot composition is super awesome. But I really struggled with the dialogue. The dialogue is rough for me. And in particular, there's I think one of the most famous lines from the whole game.
Yes, I have some things to say.
Oh, your father, my dad moment.
My dad.
Yeah, he's like, is my father, you mean my dad?
Yeah.
What do you
So
know about my father?
I think that's like the Spoonie Bard of this game. Like if this game were
No, this
Yeah.
is hard.
if this game were ever to receive like a retranslation or whatever, like the new
It would be-
localizers should keep that in there. They should keep it in there for us, the real
Oh,
ones.
good. I was gonna say the Japanese isn't all that different.
Yeah.
But I do want to point out first, given the Final Fantasy VIII podcast that we did, you are no fan of the overuse of ellipses.
Yes.
And
Oh,
there
yeah.
are tons of them in
Yes.
this, and everything Graf says, it's like 4 words and a done. It's like, hey, we get it, it's dramatic. We get it, we get it, we get it.
So the anime that plays before the music kicks in.
Yeah,
what do you
this
guys
is-
thought?
this is awesome. Like,
Yeah.
we talked about last time, like how the game is super front loaded with the anime scenes, and not only this one, but the next one in particular, I had almost completely forgotten existed at all. I was like so surprised especially when the next one came on. I was like, wait a minute! I felt like I was seeing it for the first time. Like I was like, I don't remember this at all.
Was this his dream stuff?
Well, in this case, in this scene, he asks, "Who are you?" to grab, and then like his face kind of goes like bluish, almost like
Oh
transparent.
yeah, that is the
Yeah.
strangest.
What did you make of that? Like, it's the same complexion as the sky, but his eyes remain.
Yeah.
white.
Yes, I wondered if that was even done on purpose.
It has to
It
have
had to
been.
have been.
It's a really like I feel an abstract way of just like a stomach dropping moment. Like, oh, I realize, I remember. Like, but it's like he's so like conflicted and confused. But and he's sort of like something is emerging inside of him, but he's trying to fight it because he's afraid of it. So I feel like it's this almost artistic abstract like hollowing out. But that almost you feel in your gut when like something strikes you. I don't know how to describe it.
I
That's
think
kind of
the-
the way that I read that.
I think
Never
that
seen it done before.
it has been done a lot in. It reminds me of in the original Gundam Universal Century episodes.
Yeah.
Sorry to reference Gundam again. I can't not reference Gundam.
Oh, dude, the mech spacesuit things. I mean, they all go
Yeah.
together.
But there are characters in Gundam called new types, and they have these extra psychic abilities. And every time they have these kind of new type moments where they dip into like they feel things that are kind of that are happening in other places in the world, in other places in space, and they kind of tap into this kind of this spirit realm, kind of beyond what the normal person can perceive. And I read this moment as like Faye tapping into some sort of either his own subconscious or some sort of extraneous conscious out there, where he was able to say, "Oh, who are you? Wait, I know who you are." As soon as it turns blue is when he feels that he knows who this is.
Yeah.
So he's having this like psychic moment, sort of.
Yeah. So he's like, "Who are you?" And then it goes like, "Bam!" He's like, "Oh right, like I know
Yeah.
who you are. You killed her." And then he's like, "Her," because he doesn't remember who the her is he's even referencing. He just remembers that he killed her. He's
Yeah.
like, her. Wait a minute. No. And then it kind of gets a little bit, again, kind of psychedelic or abstract.
All right.
Where he hears his voice saying, "No, it wasn't."
Dude,
me.
I love doing this crunch leather. Anytime it's like you have this flowy leather, but then you have the pinch points of where like creases would pop up, and then you have to combine the flow points with the crunch. Oh my god, I'm loving that.
That's right.
Like, I was so nervous of how to do it when I first came across it. I don't even know if this is the first time I came across it, but when the way that I decided to do it, like right here, like I was just like, okay, how would I do this? And it's just really me taking taking the chaos of all the sketch lines and then kind of bringing them together, and then it sort of makes sense. It starts to create this fractured kind of like, I don't know, like if you break a plate and then you start gluing the pieces back together and you see all that fracturing happen. It's a lot like that. And I'm trying to think if there's a way to do it better than how I'm doing it here. But I mean, in the meantime, this shit is kind of dope, huh?
And then it almost feels like this cutscene
Anyway.
is right after that. Just, the way that I could see. It seems like the same kind of place, and then boom, she dies right in front of him. He's like, what happened? Now, I don't know if that's the case. But that cross necklace she has is very interesting because it's a cross.
Yeah.
And that represents religion just in general. And that almost seems like he's like hypnotized. But hypnotized by a cross is a deeper. It says something deeper than like a stopwatch or something, right? The thing that's doing the hypnotizing is the religion itself. It's the religious symbol. I may be reading too much into that, but it seems as though the religion is hypnotized him and has got him in this like weird kind of state where he kind of becomes a different person. It's interesting.
I'm just smiling because I'm very
Yeah,
excited.
me too.
For
I can't wait to see what you have to
when
say
these
about
things
this
are
movie.
revealed and it all comes and I'm glad that you're paying attention to these things because this symbol is
All right, let's
so relevant
throw some color
to,
into
like, Faye's whole psychology.
Yeah.
this leather jacket
One thing I
now.
didn't notice originally about this scene is something to pay attention to, but the word coward is used here, and I think that's important.
Yeah,
to-
I'm a coward again. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Because he, yeah, last used it when he was responsible. So that might actually be an interesting thing where he might be blaming himself for this girl's death as well, right? Because he blamed, that's the last time he used the word coward.
Yeah, so I want to pull up some of the actual dialogue here and look at this kind of line by line. So Saiken is sort of like off to the side, watching this conversation happening and not doing much to interfere, which I thought was interesting. Right, so Faye is talking to Graf, and they'll cut to Saitan, who's just kind of standing there watching this. And he has a line where he says, "Here we go again," right? Like, oh boy, it's happening again.
That line and all that. Yeah, it's hilarious.
Yeah, so he's allowing this to happen, though. He's not trying to, like, in Lahan, he was trying at least to be like, "Hey, no, stop."
Yes, yes.
But here, he's just letting him talk to Graf.
There was collateral damage in
Mhm.
I also think Satan has a level of curiosity too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, so down.
yeah.
Well, because he's the scientist, right? He tinkers with things and.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay, so here we go again, and then we have Graf here. "My name is Graf, the seeker of power. You certainly showed how much power you had back there in the Han, didn't you, Faye?" Faye says, "How much power I had, Aizuchi."
Of course.
What are you talking about? And then Graf says, "A great power is what I need to fulfill my mission. I sent those gears into that land as a catalyst to awaken the power in you to make contact with you." So this is where it's confirmed that they fought in Lahan on purpose. Graf wanted the Veltal to fall in Lahan and for them to fight there because he wanted Faye to be awakened in some way, right?
So
Graf
Brad kind of orchestrated it.
yes, on purpose.
Right. I kind of, figured that here.
So Faye says, "As a catalyst, Aizuchi, you mean you caused that intentionally?"
No, you're reading it wrong. You're reading it wrong. As a catalyst. You mean you caused that intentionally? See, the way I read it sounds less like an actual question,
Oh, sure.
but they put a question mark on it because you have to in English, because otherwise
Instead
it,
of like
it doesn't
almost
work
using
punctuation as a catalyst.
Okay.
Yeah, so what part of Aizuchi is, like 50% of Aizuchi is you talking to yourself. Technically, you're thinking out loud.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then Graf says, "That's right, the death of your loved ones, and you powerless against it happening. The grief, the screams from your heart born out of the tragedy. That was the catalyst for triggering your power." So grief and tragedy are going to be huge themes throughout this in terms of them linking to the psychology of the character. And this is, I'm just going to drop this name now so that people can, if they want to go out and read a little bit more, will get, I guess, some context for some of like the psychology that the game's going to be examining. But in particular, Karen Hornine, who is like a neo-Freudian psychoanalyst. She has she had a sort of a theory of neurosis. Yeah, so her theory of neurosis is going to take a really big, it's going to be a really big part of kind of the psychology of Faye. But it, like, super terrible tragedy, like traumatic grief and loss that is what Graf is referring to here, right, as being like the catalyst to awakening the power in Faye that he needs to fulfill his purpose, that Graf needs. So, if you don't want the game spoiled, you're playing for the first time, maybe don't look into that just yet. But if you're playing for a second time, you want some extra like context on Faye, that will help you understand part of what he's talking about here. So then Faye says, "You mean you attacked my village just to get me into that gear? Why? Why did the villagers have to die?" And Graf says, "Who cares why? It doesn't matter how many of them died. They were wretched vermin, only living from day to day without ever fulfilling their prescribed destiny.
There we
This
go.
has, this line I think has like a pretty significant bearing on some stuff we'll get into later too. Just put pins in these things. Just remember them for later, right?
It also shares Ellie's disdain for the people on the surface.
Yes. And have you forgotten? You were the one who destroyed the village. I did not lift a finger. The Fae says, no, I was just trying to save the village and its people. I never intended to destroy it. And Graf says, is that so? Surely you've heard it. It is the essence, of the very essence of you, the voice of desire from
Alright.
within you that craves destruction. Fae says, shut up. Even if
Have we been blurry this whole
you're the
time?
one who caused it. If you hadn't come to the village, they
Dude,
would
this better not be a
destroy
blurry
you.
stream. I bet it is.
Ah, so now you resort to blame. So this is kind of the second time this has happened where Faye has tried to deflect blame away from himself and people have called him out and told him to take responsibility for it. I see, that sounds like something you would say, you in quotes. That's good, your basic nature remains unchanged. And Faye says, crap. You said my need for power, what are you intending to do with it? And here's the really key one. Graf says, you know very well, it is to destroy Mother God. Now, when you had, when I was going through the things that you had recorded for the other episode,
Yes.
you had talked about being confused about the purple-haired woman who
Yes.
emerges in her
Very
relationship
much so.
to God and whether she is God or not.
And that is what I thought of right when I read this.
Yes, he says specifically Mother God here,
Yeah.
which I thought was interesting.
And I have the Japanese as well for that.
Okay.
It is the same. It is the same word. It is Haha Narukami, which means Mother God. It is not Mother of God.
Yeah.
It is Mother God.
So to destroy Mother God. Faye says, destroy God. Graf says, yes, we will destroy God. That is our purpose. That is our destiny. Faye, don't be ridiculous. I won't get involved in such a thing. If you want to destroy God or whatever it is you're on about, do it by yourself. By the way, I saw your guys' post on Twitter the other day using that as a meme. It's hilarious. Graf says, ha ha ha, you resemble your father. Then Faye's line, my father? Me, my dad? You know my father?
Yes.
Oh,
So I-
And I agree with you guys. This is a line where if this game were to be remade, they should not change it. Like,
Right. Yeah.
it has to stay.
Yeah. This and the tinkering with his junk in the backyard.
I love that. That was great. That was wonderful.
Yeah, they better keep that one.
So, in Japanese right there, that line reads, Chichi oya, oyaji, omae oyaji o shite iru no ka? And that is not as weird in Japanese as English. However, it is saying the exact same thing. It is chichi oya, which is like parent, dad parent, so it's like father. And then oyaji, which is, I guess, a more normal way to refer to it. So it's father, you mean dad. And then omae oyaji o shite iru no ka is you, my dad. You know my dad. I mean, it's the same. It's basically the exact same in Japanese. The only difference is it should say father, dad. You know my dad. That's what it should say.
Oh, so it's almost like he's saying to himself, like, oh, Dad? Like,
And this is what I'm telling you. Half of Aizuchi is you talking to yourself. At least half of it. You're letting the person know you're following along, but at the same time, you're inflecting about it. Often, people will use informal speech for Aizuchi. I mean, you shouldn't if you're talking to someone really important, I suppose. But when you're talking to yourself, you will use less formal dialogue. Now, with a conversation like this, he's just being informal the whole time. So I can't use that to read into it enough because he's like, you jerk, shut up, stop talking, go away, dude, kill God yourself. So he's not being polite when he says these things. So I can't tell that, oh, he's just being impolite, he's talking to himself.
I think this
But
marker is
that's not how it
busted.
works. It would be inflexive. So what it should say, in my opinion, if I were to translate it, it would be, my father, dot, 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 dot.
See, because it doesn't write, but
I don't even know.
once I press, it gets like a ton of
How do you do it?
paint out.
Oh, change the-
And then I try to use it.
Yeah. So have the gray text. My father, comma, and then a whole
maybe
new
like he
block of
knows
text.
Dad.
Yeah.
And then he says out loud, "You know my father."
You know my
right?
father? That would be what they're definitely trying to go.
Dialogue
But,
box didn't let you head in advance to that point.
How do you write that? How do you write that? I don't know.
Yeah, I see what you mean though. It makes sense. And then Graf, in response to that, says that was the most delightful scream. I was enthralled by it. Nothing is more beautiful than a scream of death. Inferring he killed his dad, I guess.
Yeah.
That would be what he is. I would say he's trying to incite Faye. He's trying to like piss him off. And then he says, "What did you do to my father? What happened between you two? Do you really wish to know? There's no use in knowing it now." And he's like, "What?" And then Graf says, "Your power is still beneath that needed for my purposes. Anything unusual must be tried until it becomes suitable." And this is where the sandworm comes out of the ground, and he's like, basically, if you die now, whatever, but I need you to be more powerful, so I'm going to keep testing you.
Well, it seems like Graf is a firm believer in destiny, right?
Yeah.
So, if you die, well, I guess you want the destiny one, I suppose. Like, we'll find somebody else. That's maybe what I would take out of something like that. Otherwise, it's like, you shouldn't be trying to kill him so hard, to specifically kill him, unless he's like, for sure, like, this dude's invincible or something like that.
He does send out a sandworm that pretty much only thing it does is suck the fuel of the gear. It doesn't
Yeah.
try to kill you.
Okay.
It doesn't,
Vulnerable.
like, it does attack sometimes, but, like, I would say half or more of its moves were just basically taking your fuel.
Yeah.
So it was kind of strange, yeah.
Yeah, they're trying to get this is sort of a tutorial to teach you how to use the ether machine where you can use
Right.
your
The
abilities.
Kamehameha blast.
Yes, and yes. And the weird thing is like you don't really use those too much throughout the game unless you spec specifically for them. So, but it works out.
This scene specifically, I also think it's possible to maybe wonder if Sidon and Grov both want the same thing from Faye. And Sidon's silence is maybe an observation point to see if Grov's methods are effective.
I think
There's not allowed
I think
to
you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And yeah, the other note about the sandworm too is physical attacks it's very resistant to physical attacks. So just another way that it's kind of pushing you. I think you're right to say tutorializing you to use the ether instead. Just to show you, hey, you don't just do karate in this thing. You can also use magic too. Right?
You also get an eyeball as a reward for that, and keep a lookout because there's only one vendor in the game that gives you top dollar for that stuff.
Right. Okay, so that kind of ends that scene, and then after that, they get captured by the Ave gears that are nearby, right? And they like take the gear away onto their little, I don't know, their little vehicle thing that's like taking it back to, I don't know, like the Dazzle or something.
I thought it was interesting that when Faye got out of the cockpit, Sidon was trying to tell Faye to remain calm, and he didn't want Faye to leave it right here. But I think he kind of stopped halfway because all Faye did was respond with 3 dots. He just sat there. Yeah, he was already like, I'm already done. Like I think Faye has been, he's reaching an inflection point. It's not rage and anger. It's more along the lines of like, who am I and what's going on?
Yeah.
And yeah, he talks about that in the next scene actually.
He's been through the ringer emotionally at this point, and he just does not know what to make of it.
He's got no anger left.
Yeah. And so you get captured and you're aboard that vessel as it's taking you back as a prisoner. And this is where you get some really good dialogue between Faye and Saitan, where it kind of leaves it up to you though as the player. You can choose to keep talking to him to get like extra pieces of stuff or extra pieces of context, or you can just kind of go to sleep or whatever. But I was shocked.
This is where he doesn't answer your questions. He'll ask him about himself, and he's like, doesn't talk about it.
Kind of hiding things from him, obviously. But I was shocked because I did not remember this scene happening so early, where it goes into that like spacey psychedelic,
The time of the gospel, right?
and he's talking to. Do they reveal who he is?
It says the emperor.
So
Yeah.
it's the emperor. Okay.
Yeah,
So he's
it says
speaking
the
to
emperor.
the emperor, but did they give his name in the scene? again?
Not
Yeah.
that I saw.
Okay.
No,
So- Won't mention his name. But he's talking to the emperor in some crazy
Yeah.
place.
With all these paintings, I tried to see if any of them were the paintings that Faye did at the beginning of the game.
I think it is implied that those are Faye paintings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just because he's a painter, and there's
Yeah, they're kind of all abstract and impossible to tell, but I
That's true, because they was doing some pretty abstract stuff.
It might be apocrypha, but I think that's intended to be face paintings.
Yeah.
Okay,
So we'll just say Faye paintings are flying around in space. And the Emperor's sitting on a throne like that's floating there, and Saitan is there talking to him. And it's just, again, maybe this is just me on a second playthrough, having knowing where the story's going, being like, this is very heavy-handed foreshadowing, but maybe it's vague enough to where, like, people on a first playthrough aren't going to read that much into it, or will just be so confused by and overwhelmed by the number of things happening, to where you just kind of forget it. Because again, I forgot that this happened this early. I forgot about, especially the next anime cutscene we see. I was like, this happens now? Like, wow, this game is so front-loaded with huge setups and foreshadowing that, like, I almost felt like the game was spoiling itself, but obviously it doesn't, since I didn't pick up on it my first playthrough, and I assume most people are the same way. Most people are pretty confused by the time they get to the end of this game, right? Until they start researching it more and looking into it. But they mentioned specifically the time.
Oh shit, this should have been
in this,
24. Oh well. I know we just passed at midnight,
and,
so it just turned into the
Saitan,
next
in
day.
the conversation with Faye as he's listening to him, is
Oh well.
wondering about, you know, is it now? Is the time of the gospel happening now? Like, is this kind of the end? You know? But I don't want to comment too much on what the time of the gospel is quite yet, other than to say the Emperor mentioned specifically it's relating to the resurrection of God.
I mean,
That, you know, the time of the gospel is going to be a time where they locate God and they resurrect God and bring him back.
well, so the time of the gospel, it occurs, it feels to me like a window. The word they use for time in Japanese is like an era. And gospel, surprisingly, is the exact same word. It's like a direct from the Greek. It means, the kanji mean, like fortunate, sound or noise. And the word gospel in Greek means good news. Right. Oh, true. And in Japanese, it's like fortune sound. You know, it's basically saying the same thing as the Greek, not so much the English. Although I guess, because they do have the katakana gotsuperu, but they use kanji for this one, which makes it's different, it's a little bit different. Now these words have been in Japan for like 500 years, so that's probably why they were just written in kanji. But one thing I did, okay, so I had a few takeaways here, but the time of the gospel, he says, we have to do it before a certain time. It's not like this is definitely going to happen. It's like the time of the gospel is here. If it shows up and God isn't resurrected, then that's bad.
Yes.
So it's not so much like, what I got from it is it's not so much God is going to be resurrected. It's like we have to do it.
Yes.
We have to make the resurrection happen because the time of the gospel. So the time of the gospel and the resurrection are not connected.
okay.
From what I can tell, the time of the gospel is going to happen no matter what. It's the resurrection that needs to be made to happen. It will not, anyways. I think I made it.
It's so much fun to watch you sort through this.
Dude, and I don't even know what it freaking means, okay? All right, Mother God, and so she died somehow, and they gotta bring her back, and okay, and that's fine, but, like, the time of the gospel is the weirdest.
All right, that's one. So.